Welcome to our podcast series on diversity and inclusion, brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading independent professional body dedicated to promoting best practice and raising the standards of coaching worldwide. I'm Dr Alexandra Morgan, Senior Lecturer and Coach Educator. In this series, we're privileged to be talking to a superb range of coaches and consultants whose work is making a significant contribution to advancing diversity and inclusion in society and in the coaching profession. We hope this series sparks curiosity and encourages change. Well, welcome back, everybody, to our podcast series on diversity and inclusion. I'm Alex Morgan, and with me today I have Shalini Sequeira. And Shalini is an executive coach and facilitator. Hi, Shalini.
Hi, Alex. Lovely to be here.
And our topic today is institutional racism, but specifically in the coaching industry. And I know that you've had actually direct and personal experience of this, and then it made you think, well, okay, I need to look at this a little bit more closely. So can you tell us something about that?
So I think my observations about racism in different sectors started when I thought about my experience as a corporate lawyer, which was my first career, and how at the time when I was a lawyer, there was a lot of sexism and a lot of very quiet racism going on. And you only had to look at the top of organisations to see that there were very few women like me who made it to the top, if any. And I worked in finance, and I'd say my first role model of an Indian or kind of Indian heritage woman in finance didn't arrive on the scene until long after I'd left law. So I didn't have any role models at all. And I guess I thought when I went into coaching that coaching, because it's full of people who really want to make a difference to the world and to help people to develop, would be different. And I found that it wasn't actually that different. And I feel it's still an inequitable profession, and that the system of coaching is inequitable too. And that actually it's not so different from the world of corporate law a few decades ago.
So an inequitable profession and an inequitable system. So how did you draw that conclusion? What did you see? What did you experience? What have you heard of others experience?
I think the very first thing that I saw when I did my own coaching training was that there were no other people who were not white on my course. And none of the tutors were non-white. I'm using non-white as a term because we don't have a perfect term to describe people who are different. But there were also no people of colour who came to assess us. So all of the people kind of on that course, bar one of the mentors, were white. And so I felt as if I did stick out a bit. And we didn't also think about any inequities in the coaching system at all. There was no discussion when we were training as coaches about what is this system like. And there was a kind of unspoken assumption that the system was good and the system was fine and didn't need to be talked about. But my experience of being the only person who was not white was quite similar to some of the legal jobs that I'd had as well. And I suppose that's when I started thinking about, well, what could the similarities be here, actually? And then I was very keen to work with women and also men and women who were not white to support them to be leaders in organisations. And I spent about a year talking to people about this idea with somebody I was working with, Joe Larby from Inclusive Professions. We went out together, and we were both very credible individuals. People liked us. They could see that we were talking sense, but we didn't manage to get any work at all. And there was a sense in which once we said, well, look, we really feel that diverse talent, women and people of colour need help because the playing field isn't level, that we became pigeonholed as people that could only work with non-white people. And there are very few coachees, actually, because of the level at which coaching is often offered. there are very few coachees who aren't white compared to the number of coachees who are white. So already the pool of people that we were being considered for was pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought in a couple of times to have a chemistry session with somebody, and it became clear to me that actually the system inside that organisation needed fixing, not the person. But I was being brought in as a way to divert attention from the fact that the system wasn't working and to be a sort of sticking plaster. So these were people who wanted to move to the next level of leadership, but it seemed to me that the system didn't really want them. And so I was being brought in to try to fix something that wasn't fixable, actually, by a few sessions of coaching. And that felt quite insulting. And it, first of all, I mean, I suppose lots of coaches in the same situation like me would have thought, well, maybe I just wasn't the right fit, or maybe I'm not good enough at coaching yet, which could have also been true. But when I looked around at who I knew within my network of coaches, there were actually very few coaches of colour. Very few. One has to ask, why is that? Why are there so few people of colour here? What happens to the coaches of colour who train? Where are they? Are they finding work? Are they able to sustain themselves as coaches? Or are they slowly being weeded out of the system? And does anyone actually care about that? And I'd have conversations with people, and I would say to them, do you have any non-white coaches on your roster of coaches? And there would be a kind of embarrassed silence, which either meant they didn't have any, or they didn't know and they'd never even thought about it before.
And I can see, as you're describing, that, you know, this starts right at the stage of recruiting into coach training. And, you know, being in coach training myself, you know, I'm having a kind of hold the mirror up moment here about, well, what precisely does the program that I run, how do we attract and make ourselves look available and welcoming and inclusive? And then your experience once you got onto a coach training program was that you experienced difference there. It became obvious that you were different.
Yeah, and that there were no role models for me at all. And as I look around my network of coaches, I think that anybody I know who's non-white coming into coaching would probably have a similar experience of very few role models. You know, where are the people of colour writing books about coaching, or speaking at conferences, and not being the one token person of colour who's been invited to make it look as though it's not just the same old people? Where are the amazing supervisors? You know, where are the people who are diverse, who are making this profession different?
I'm also circling back now to the thing that you said about chemistry sessions. And I'm always quite challenged by I don't like the term chemistry session, but that's a whole conversation for another day. But even so, I'm often quite challenged about the idea of them, because I'm often suspicious, shall we say, that people are looking for similarity in those chemistry sessions, not difference. You know, that they want to find a coach that's like me. You know, and I'm not saying it's necessarily conscious. It might be, but it's unconscious. And I've always struggled with that idea as to, you know, to me, surely a better coach is a coach who is different and can provide a different perspective.
That's certainly what I've always really enjoyed when I've been coached, is somebody who isn't like me and who has a different lens on things, and so therefore can lead me down paths of thinking that I'd never have thought of myself. And I've probably experienced that people in coaching, when they're given a chemistry session, are looking for people like them, and that's how they make their decision. And perhaps they're not very well equipped with the right information as to what would make a good coach for anybody. So the people are offered chemistry sessions and go into them not really knowing what it is they're supposed to be looking for, and probably revert to, is this person like me?
Yes, I think that is what happens often, because I don't think people get actually briefed at all or well enough about what the point of a chemistry session is.
No.
And what one should be looking for and working out and aligning and looking for in your coach. That's only part of the problem. It's just, something that occurred to me as you were talking. The issues that you came across in your early practice, may I ask where you're at with that now? How has your practice developed since then?
Well, I had an interesting first year trying to sell this coaching with Joe, and we both decided at the end of the year that we couldn't carry on doing that because it was personally very stressful to keep talking about ourselves and our experience and why we wanted to do this work. And there was a term that I heard just after George Floyd's death called weathering, where the people who keep talking about their own experiences just feel weathered by it after a while.
Right, yeah.
And what I decided to do instead was start writing on LinkedIn about some of the things I thought about the coaching system in order to find out who else out there was also thinking like this and build a kind of community of people that cared about the system so that maybe I could have some impact on the system. And that way, I actually got my first piece of associate work from the executive coaching consultancy who had been doing a lot of thinking about this for a long time and are really interested in bringing more equity into the world of coaching in all different ways. And it was such a relief to connect with some people that also had been thinking about this and cared about it and wanted to do something about it. And all the things that I was talking about, they'd already thought about and recognised were problems. And I remember talking to Kate Bullitt and actually crying because of the relief of somebody just getting what I was talking about. And so that was brilliant. And I've continued to work with them and to get quite a lot of other associate work, actually. And although I haven't really built up my own practice, I'm still working on what exactly is it that I want to do in my own practice. And really enjoying all the associate work that I'm doing, which is also about, in many cases, bringing coaching to people that wouldn't normally have thought about coaching or wouldn't normally think about it. It was for them. So right now I'm working with Claw Social Leadership and I'm coaching a number of refugees and asylum seekers who are leaders in their sector of refugees and asylum seekers. And, that's been really brilliant to do because a number of them wouldn't have had access to coaching had it not been for this programme.
Fantastic. And in having these conversations, via LinkedIn and through your associate work, and you've done an excellent job at opening up discussion around this. Have you sensed any kind of shift, or is it too early to have sensed it?
I think more and more coaches are interested in equity and are seeing that the profession isn't equitable. So that's a positive. I still think when I look at the photos on the websites of many coaching organisations, they often are predominantly white. So I'm not sure how much that's translating into organisations really examining themselves and thinking, how can we become more diverse? And obviously, I'm just looking at it through one lens here, which is race. But there are so many other ways in which we need to bring equity and diversity into the profession. So there's lots being talked about. I'm not sure how much action and change has resulted.
Yeah, well, I think you make a good point. And in terms of action and change, if you were to make a series of recommendations, to coach providers, coach training organizations, purchasers of coaching, what would you recommend?
Coach training providers, I think it's an easy one to look at how diverse is the population of people that you're attracting. Have you got a really diverse cohort of people? Because if you do have a diverse cohort, people are going to learn so much more and be so much more au fait with the different kind of issues in the system. If it's a very homogeneous cohort, they're not going to. So I think coach training providers have a role here to look at themselves closely and be taking some steps to get really diverse cohorts and to have diverse people teaching, diverse people assessing. So every level to be role modelling diversity. That's the first thing. For people who are fielding coaches, so for coaching companies, again, how diverse is the panel of coaches that you're fielding? Do you really have diversity in all different kinds of ways? And if not, what are you doing to address that? And how are you actively trying to find people who may not be easily findable? So how are you actively trying to find coaches of colour, not just asking the people in your network, but actually going a bit further than that and trying to find people and perhaps even grow your own, train up your own coaches of colour to be part of your group of coaches.
Very good point.
And again, I'm only looking at this now through the lens of race, but there are lots of other areas of equity also to be addressed.
Yeah.
And one of those is disability. You know, how many disabled coaches do people know? How many disabled coaches have they got on their panels? Because in many ways, disability is the very last aspect of equity that people are really dealing with in all facets of life. And then if you are buying in coaching, are you checking to see that you have across your population of coaches that you're using, you've got diversity? And are you checking to see that if you put 3 coaches up to somebody for them to choose from, you've actually put 3 diverse coaches in front of them?
Yeah.
So there are lots of really simple things that people can start doing in a conscious way that would start to bring more equity into the system.
Really useful, thank you. And for your own work, you know, I'm intrigued where you're going to go. So what, at the moment, you've got some nice work coming through your associate relationships. And you said that you were in the process of framing up what your own practice would look like. Are there any sort of first thoughts around that you can share with us? Or?
I think there are. I as I said at the beginning, you know, I'm really interested in seeing diverse leadership teams at all levels and in all sectors. And obviously that's a huge ambition, which I'm not going to be able to achieve on my own. But I think I'm grappling with how to make a bigger impact, a bit of a more systemic impact. And coaching people individually does make an impact, but it's quite slow to have a systemic impact.
Yeah.
And I've done various bits of group coaching this year, and I think that makes a bigger systemic impact, actually, because not only are you coaching people as individuals, but you're helping them to build a network which they will take with them after the coaching finishes. And that network can have a bigger systemic impact than coaching those people only individually could have, I believe. So I'm trying to think about ways to have a more systemic impact through what I do to lead into the mission that I've got.
Yeah. In terms of your group coaching, what kind of groups do you work with and what are you brought in to do as such? What does the group think you're there for?
So the group is often a bit confused about what the coaching is about. And so generally we do spend some time at the beginning talking about what might you be able to get from group coaching actually for yourself and your career. And it's often midway through the group coaching that the penny drops for them. So they say all the right things to start with about what they want from the group coaching, but they don't realise they're really going to get it until halfway through, when they realise how powerful it is to have a group of people that you've worked with at quite a deep level turning up every month to discuss issues that you've all agreed that you want to discuss. So I've been working mainly with people of colour, groups of people of colour, but also I've had a group of people who all wanted to do coaching, which was being offered as a way to give development to people who had protected characteristics. And this was a mixed group. So they had different characteristics that brought them into the coaching, but actually all really enjoyed working together and having different viewpoints really on equity and on all the different challenges that we discussed. But I think they probably would never have met each other actually had they not come together through the coaching, but they all felt it had been an amazing opportunity to meet very different people from across the organisation and carry on that network afterwards.
So, in fact, you just answered. I think you've just answered the next question I was going to ask you, because I was wondering whether these group coaching groups were paid for by an organisation or whether they were open groups.
These ones were paid for by the organisation, but one of the things that I'm thinking about doing with Joe is doing something that would be outside of an organisation where people could just put themselves on it, sort of an open kind of course of group coaching that people could join up to.
Yeah, I think that would be very attractive to a lot of individuals who resonate with what you're saying, but at the same time, they don't work within a system where they would have somebody else that would pay for that experience for them.
Yeah. And what we do know, Joe and I, from all the work that we've done, is that when we talk to people, particularly people who are not white in organisations, they often feel quite lonely and quite isolated. And this could be a way for them to build a network of people, even if not everybody was from their own organisation, that would kind of add something else into working life and help them to feel less isolated.
Mm. And it's interesting because we started the conversation when you were talking about the lack of role models, and it, struck me in that moment that here you are now being a role model, and a role model for equity and coaching, a role model for diverse leadership, and for a change in the coaching industry, which has been a long time coming. Does that feel heavy on your shoulders, or is that what you want to do, what you want to be?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I often say to people who I'm working with in one way or the other that whether or not you've thought about it, you are a role model. People are going to be looking up at how you're doing things. And so you're right, I am a role model just by virtue of what I do and being who I am. And I think what I like about that is that perhaps I'm offering that to people who might not have that many role models out there. And I know how important it is to have role models, actually. It really does make a difference between feeling that you can reach for something and it's attainable and feeling that you could never do that in a month of Sundays.
Yeah, fantastic. So Shalini, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm sure there'll be people out there that would be interested in connecting with you, no doubt interested in reading your blog that's on LinkedIn, for example. So how can people connect with you?
Oh, I'd love to connect with people who are interested in equity in the coaching system. And the best way for people to find me is on LinkedIn, and just connect with me there, just so that they know my name. It's Shalini, Shalini, and Sequeira, Sequeira.
Brilliant. Thanks once again for your time. Thoroughly enjoyable conversation. Thank you for, also holding the mirror up to people like me and coach training organisations for the changes that need to be made. So most grateful for that. And I hope our paths cross again soon.
Oh, thanks, Alex. I've really enjoyed it. And I do as well. I hope our paths cross again soon.
So thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I've been Alex Morgan. Our purpose is to inspire and champion coaching excellence to advance the coaching profession and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations and in turn society. If you'd like to find out more, please follow us on LinkedIn and explore our webpage at theassociationforcoaching.com. There you can keep up to date with our latest episodes and conversations, as well as our digital learning calendar.